One of the biggest things we've been hearing throughout this entire pandemic, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is that there appears to be some form of psychological warfare element to what's taking place right now. Whether it be the constant censorship, whether it be the constant fear that's coming forward, or the fact that when we look around, we see not only people attacking one another constantly, but no matter what the facts are and how they're presented, people are not able to make sense of what's going on very easily. Now, oftentimes people have been calling this a mass psychosis. So the question then becomes, how did we get here? What exactly happened and what is taking place on a deeper level? To break that down, I'm going to play a video here from Yuri Bezmenov. And he is a KGB defector. So he escaped the Soviet Union back when he started to realize what was going on there with the propaganda and the brainwashing and the direction that the Soviet was taking things. And he gave this interview in 1984 where he was basically warning America about a specific process that was taking place in America that is extremely relevant right now. Check it out.
When the Soviets used the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda, When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable.
So look, I want to talk about some solutions to what's happening here, right? But just to recap, we can see that in Yuri's warning here, if you will. We're kind of in the stages of number 2, 3, and 4 there, where we're having the destabilization, we're having the crisis, and we're having the normalization, right? Now, of course, this can be argued, and perhaps some people are going to come in with a different perspective, and I really, really welcome that in the comments. I want to hear from you guys of what you think, about whether or not this is really applicable to today or not. When I look at this, I feel it is, and so that's why I'm sharing what I'm sharing here today. But essentially, we're seeing that through this particular crisis, of the pandemic and what we talk about that. And I know everybody kind of has a bit of a different perspective on how much of a crisis it really is. But the general point here is we are seeing not just a countrywide, but a global effort to destabilize, a global effort to create crisis and to basically normalize things that are really in the realm of more surveillance, more control, less privacy, more centralization of power, right? We're seeing how simple it was for people to, I guess you could say for powerful elite figures to basically destabilize an economy, allow people to lose, a lot of their livelihood, a lot of their assets, and then buy up tons of land. We're seeing a massive purchasing of farmland. We're seeing a massive purchasing of people's real estate and stuff like that as they're losing that throughout this entire crisis. And the normalization piece to this is when we're going to see a lot of, as these mandates, as we hear so many of the threats, right, that are being presented to us. So we need vaccine mandates. We need to know what people are doing. We need to know where they are at all times. We need to potentially have implantable chips eventually that can tell us whether or not they're sick and report that back to a centralized location. The economy falling apart shows that we need to have a change in the way the economy works, and it needs to be controlled by this set of people, right? So we're seeing this normalization of the type of authoritarian rule that we saw take place throughout this pandemic, right? So we're hearing the whispers of that right now. That's part of what's coming into play. But from a solution perspective, right? Because I think you can put together everything in your own mind as to what Yuri said here. But from a loose solution perspective, which is something we love to focus on here at The Pulse, and we also do that a lot on our channel, Collective Evolution, I really want to talk about what we think and what we've been talking about for so many years about what's important to do right now. How do we counteract so much of what is happening? How do we create a new system that renders the old obsolete, as Buckminster Fuller would have said? I'm going to basically break this down into two things. One is the type of media we're consuming, and the second is really looking at, kind of our own internal process of understanding ourselves, of understanding our beliefs, of understanding our ideas, whether or not we're seeking to actually find truth versus seeking to reinforce a particular belief system or ideology we have. There's this idea that it's like the independent or alternative media is always right and the mainstream media is always wrong, right? If we're on the side of the independent media or the alternative media. Now, the reality of the situation is we might want to look at this in terms of something a little bit different. What outlets, what people, what analysts, what commentators, what people running podcasts, whatever it might be, who is like loose and flexible enough in what they're exploring that they haven't built an identity around it? Who is trying to converge on truth, trying to get to truth, trying to figure it out, as opposed to those that are just trying to say, I know exactly what the truth is, and here's what it is, and here's my story, and here's how it works. When you start to gain awareness about how to look for that, a couple things happen. Not only do you improve your ability to discern, but you get less attracted to overly sensationalized media, and you ultimately try and actually navigate the complexity of the situation out there, you start to navigate what is actually truth versus what is just opinion versus what is just somebody's perspective on something. And why this is so important to improve and build this skill is because one of the most important things in having a solution to what's taking place right now is to be able to create a culture that can actually move forward. Now, how do you create a culture that can move forward? We need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to agree on stuff. We need to be able to see where the data, the evidence that is looking at the full picture actually leading to. What is actually happening? What are we actually seeing? And how do we agree on something? So if we're just running off on sensationalist ideas constantly, well, a whole bunch of intelligent people are going to very quickly see that and poke holes in it, and then we won't be able to communicate. We won't be able to get on the same page. So a community, a culture that can communicate with one another, that is more interested in converging on truth versus just trying to be right and holding on to our ideologies as to what we think the world exactly looks like and how it works. That type of culture will move forward. It happens on the communication end first. Once we're able to communicate, we're able to discern, we're able to sense make better, we're able to bring our ideas and unify under a deeper understanding, as opposed to everybody has their own perspective and everybody's just fighting each other to try and make everyone else see that they're right. The second piece to this is really looking at ourselves, right? How is it that we came to believe the things that we believe? Why do we think the things we do about COVID? So a lot of the times, and this is a journey we all go through in some way, shape, or form, we kind of think we really know something because we saw a bunch of stuff, right? And then we can easily go down that rabbit hole of, I keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, and then I start surrounding myself with only those types of voices over and over and over again. And the next thing you know, we get stuck in a particular ideology or belief system that we now identify with about what's going on with something like COVID. It could be really anything. And what starts to happen there is you'll notice that if somebody provides a different fact that collapses something inside your existing ideology or narrative, you feel a sense of resistance. You almost have to think, well, that can't be true. They must be lying to us about that. That data must be false. And while there can be false information or data in the world, that's our initial way of just pushing it away. So the key thing to note there is how instead of trying to find out, is that data real? Is that data legitimate? We're just saying, I don't even want to look at that because it must be false. When we get into this position, we're in trouble. And what I mean by that is we've gotten into a state of mind, a state of being that is now identified, like I said, with an ideology or a belief system, which means now we're stuck. We're not looking to seek truth anymore. We're not looking to move forward. We're not looking to connect with our fellow, man and woman out there and find ways to understand what solutions are and how to move forward. We're now just wanting everybody to see things how we see it. We want to be right. We want everybody to just come onto our side. When we do that, we are creating division more than we can realize. And so one of the key things is here, really starting to look at and notice where we're starting to identify with ideas. Taking a moment, relax your body, literally relax your body, feel the tension in your body and relax it. Take a breath, then consume media, then question things. Be curious about other perspectives that are happening around the issue that you feel so passionate about. When we start to consider these perspectives and we take a moment to be present, we take a moment to get inside our bodies, we start to change physiologically how our mind and executive functioning starts to work, right? Instead of being sort of closed off, almost in a survival state, almost in a slightly stressed out state, where our executive function starts to push down and we're just saying, well, you know what, I just need to reinforce, I need to reinforce what it is that I believe. We're kind of expanding our mind. We're bringing our creativity on board. We're bringing our ability to discern, to feel on board. And when we do that, you'll notice where you have uncertainty in your ideas, and you're willing to admit that. You're willing to play with that. You're willing to sit with that. You're willing to explore that. And when we do that, and this is why I'm pointing to this as a solution to a lot of what Yuri's talking about here, when we do that, this normalization phase of trying to normalize these ideas can be challenged effectively by people. So instead of fighting and ranting and raving and arguing and fighting and dividing, which will not fix the normalization phase, we stand strong in curiosity and in inquiry. We stand strong in saying, look, this is not correct. And people are willing to listen because we have a state of being about ourselves. We have a state of understanding about ourselves that's open to respect from other people, that is open to curiosity from other people. And that is one of the key things in moving beyond a lot of this stuff. The elite, if you will, the people that are socially engineering a lot of what's taking place right now, want us to not be able to communicate with the other side. That is crucial. So if we're finding all the time that we can't communicate with our friends and family, that everybody online thinks we're crazy and we're idiots and blah, 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 instead of just always blaming them about how psychotic they are, perhaps consider whether or not it might be your approach. And that is one thing that's really, really, really important to consider. And in fact, we have a whole course on this inside our premium membership called Overcoming Bias and Improving Critical Thinking, which has been a massive success in improving people's conversation with other people when it comes to this kind of stuff. Anywho, hope you enjoyed this video. As always, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.